We're here today to talk about Fantastic Four First Steps, the newest installment of the MCU. My name is Kit Laser. I'm here with my friend and resident guy in the chair, Steve.
Me.
We've both seen the movie, and this is a strange movie. They should have called it Fascinating Four. I think a lot of the choices are bizarre, some in a good way, some in a not so good way. I just want you to know I did enjoy this movie for the most part. I like the movie. I'm going to have a lot of criticisms, probably. I never know what I'm going to say, but it feels like I'm going to. So I don't want you to come away thinking this is an entirely negative review. Also, fair warning, this is going to be a spoiler review. I feel like when it comes to YouTube, especially, I come to the game kind of late, and you've already seen 9 or 10 big popular YouTube reviewers do spoiler-free reviews. So I thought maybe that's how I can contribute to the conversation. Is just this will be for everybody who watched the movie on opening night or so, right? So this is going to be a spoiler review of Fantastic Four First Steps. I enjoyed this movie. I really, really did. I think it's worth noting that I saw a triple feature yesterday. I saw Oh, Hi, Sorry, Baby, and then Fantastic Four: First Steps.
Big old brag there.
It was the third movie in a triple feature. I didn't sleep much the night before. I was up since 6 a.m. I should have been exhausted. And it was the kind of triple feature where I ran from each theater, not literally, but metaphorically, during the credits to get to the next screening where the trailers were almost over. So it was perfect, but I should have been like exhausted and disinterested by the third film. And I wasn't. I was locked in. I had a good time watching this movie. And so it kind of had an uphill battle in holding my attention, and it did that. So props to it for that. But I still think a lot of the things about this movie, Fantastic Four, are strange. It's a movie of opposites in the sense that the cast is incredible. They're perfectly cast. I think they're great choices. But I personally don't feel like anybody outside of Vanessa Kirby shined, which is weird because Julia Garner's character is literally shiny. She's a metallic person. And so you'd think they would. Everybody's fine at worst, right? But only Vanessa Kirby was fantastic. And I'm sorry. Another opposite is that it's a fun movie. It really is. But I don't think it's anywhere near as funny as it's trying to be, especially for a Marvel film. They're famous and sometimes notorious for their little quips and one-liners and maybe taking serious moments and softening them with humor. This movie tries to do that, but the only big guffaw, chuckle, if you will, that the theater got was Paul Walter Hauser's character, Mole Man. His line when he takes a shot at Johnny and says, "Hey, don't be mad, I didn't dress you."
It's a great line.
It is a great line.
It's very funny.
I'm going to try to remember that for future arguments. As a whole, it's not a super light movie. I think the core plot of this film is actually quite heavy, which I like, but it is an opposite kind of situation. The last opposite is that it's a really pretty movie. I think it's well shot. They used a lot of practical sets and practical effects. I love the retro futuristic design and the whole vibe of the movie in general, but it's also a really ugly movie at times. I love Julia Garner, and I can't express that enough to you. And I think her performance is incredible. I love the Silver Surfer as a character. I think it's super cool and quite literally really far out there, but it's just so digitized that it's a little goofy looking at times. But specifically, the baby. I think Franklin Richards, cast as Renesmee, is a very interesting choice. And it took me out a lot of the movie.
There's a scene where the Thing, a completely CGI'd character, is holding the baby. And I'm like, how is the baby the fakest thing in this shot right now? Yeah. That's insane to me.
The Thing does look more real than that. And babies are tough in general, but tough to digitize, I think, probably. They never let you know their next move. And so I guess
that's true.
To digitize them might be strange.
What's more dangerous than a predator?
A child. So yeah, I think that's why I call it a movie of opposites, is those three categories. And it's interesting too, because this movie takes, I think, a very similar approach that James Gunn took with his Superman movie, in the sense that it really almost completely forgoes an origin story. And it wants to make you feel like you're in this already established universe with all of this stuff going on, and you're supposed to soak it up organically, which I think for the most part works and I appreciate it, but I wonder how it's going to work with general audiences, because I don't think the origin of the Fantastic Four is as ingrained in pop culture as Superman's origin story is. And so I fear for them in that respect. Like, how many people are overly familiar with the Silver Surfer and how Reed Richards and his family got their powers and what that implies? And you might say, well, the MCU is in phase 6, bucko. So of course they're just going to jump right in. I get that, but this is an alternate Earth. And what I expected, and in a lot of ways, I'm glad for this subversion, but what I expected was they would get their powers, learn what they are and how to use them, go on some smaller adventures, and we would see this team effort. But none of that happens. You don't get to see them being fantastic or doing any teamwork almost at all, which again is kind of cool, but it is really bizarre, right? Like, they're fighting this galactic level threat, pun intended. It's Galactus. It feels like an Infinity War for a universe that we're seeing the first movie of. And it's fascinating to me.
Yeah, it's strange that we don't really get to see them thwart crime in any real extent, other than the very beginning. They have like a newscast sort of, here's what you missed in the last 4 years with the Fantastic Four, which it's fun. It's a very fun scene. But other than that, they don't really thwart crime until the very, very end when they fight Galactus. It's very odd.
I agree.
And I would have liked to have seen more, because I don't know if you felt this way, but I got the distinct impression that they were doing everything they could to not have Reed Richards be stretchy.
I got that same vibe, which is interesting. I think they're wrong about that, because we live in a post-Elastigirl world. We're all ready to see Pedro Pascal flopping around, swinging his dumpy through the buildings. And I needed that, and I wanted more of it than I got. I'll tell you that. But what did work about this movie is the really dark crux of the story, which is essentially this galactic trolley problem. The idea that Galactus would spare Earth if they gave them their new baby. And Sue Storm and Reed Richards being completely unwilling to do that. There's a point at the climax of the film where Sue walks out to give a speech to the rabble. And it's really corny and badly written until the end, when she says, I will not sacrifice my child for the world, but I also will not sacrifice the world for my child, right? There were 3 or 4 moments during this film where I'm never checked out, but I'm never really that invested until I'm suddenly crying. But I thought it was fascinating, this ethical quandary that they're put into, and the idea of the one versus the many, and we have to view every life as precious or none of them are kind of situation. If I had 2 nickels for every time Pedro Pascal has been forced to choose between one life he cares about very much and the life of the entire world, I would have 2 nickels, which isn't a lot, but it's weird it happened twice. But yeah, so I thought that was incredibly interesting, and it made me cry a bunch of times. Like, that kind of stuff worked for me, and it made me care deeply about this obviously atrocious digital baby. All of that stuff worked, and I think that's such a fascinating tactic for this film, this kind of like reset of the MCU. It's not a big team up movie. It's just them being a family and trying to cope against the rising tide of change. And there's another scene. Reed Richards, Pedro Pascal, is alone with the baby. And they've established this sort of dark way that his brain operates, where he can't help but to envision the worst possible scenario and then use his brain to try to avoid it. And so he's happy, but he's constantly stuck imagining all these awful things and waiting for the other shoe to come down. And I unfortunately resonated with that a lot. Like, I have extreme issues with morbid thinking and anxiety. And unfortunately, I'm not even smart at all, much less a Reed Richards type. So I can't even do anything to avoid it. I'm just constantly in a state of, it's going to happen.
I've seen the stuff you've written on chalkboards before. You're like, this is the solution. I'm like, that's just a picture of a dog shitting.
Yeah, and stick figures. And that weird S symbol with the 6 lines where you connect them.
Hell yeah. I didn't know you were cool too.
That's all my chalkboard is. But he's alone with the baby, and he was like, most parents want you to be a mirror image of them or something like that. I don't want you to be anything like me. Oh, I was racked, dude. Like, I totally get that. And I thought it was an amazingly complex, deep thing to put into this movie that's not really trying to do a whole hell of a lot else. So I loved all the stuff about parenthood and specifically motherhood, the idea that it's that go-go mom strength that allows Sue to save the world. I could be wrong, but I think that's what's going to work least with most people, if that makes sense. And that's the only stuff that did work for me. And I could be completely off base about how it's going to land, because it does seem like most people genuinely really like this movie. But those are my like kind of spoiler tinged impressions of this movie. I think it's fucking bizarre, but it is a fun movie that did affect me profoundly, even at times. I hope you enjoyed the Fantastic Four First Steps flick. Let me know your thoughts in the comments, and be sure to subscribe, follow a lot more of what we're doing. We're going to drop at least 2 of these videos weekly for the foreseeable future. We're going to build our audience here on YouTube. You may be familiar with my work over on TikTok and Instagram at Movies Are Therapy, or our work together on the podcast streaming things available on all platforms. We've even got a big live show coming up in Cincinnati, November 7th. Some tickets still are available. There's only a few left, but there are some. But yeah, I appreciate you watching this video. Thank you for supporting what we do. Until next time, be kind to each other in the comments and love what you love.